Hello, and welcome to the next episode of Two Girls Talk Transits. Today, we're reviewing the astrology from September 15th through September 21st, and we're your hosts. I'm Maddie.
And I'm Kaleigh.
Welcome. So, this is eclipse week. We are diving into the eclipse season of the fall, and we start off kind of setting the vibe for eclipse week is on September 16th when Venus is in Libra. It will be opposite Chiron. This is Venus in Libra is probably one of our really powerful placements. She has a bit of a relationship to this eclipse because she's ruling the next one and she's opposite Chiron. So I think there's a feeling of like a womb or a pain point or fear, discomfort, something that is hard to deal with, hard to manage, kind of coming to light at the start of this week. How do you feel?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think so Chiron representing our wounds, and then whenever we have an opposition, it's like the energy has difficulty flowing, I guess, between the 2 points. And then, Venus representing it can be like relationships or our values, what we hold value to. Um, can be like our relationship to beauty, our money. Yeah, just things like that. And having an opposition, there's just like some kind of difficulty between these 2 points. There's something that's not being like flowing well. So yeah, we just might experience some type of wound in that Venetian area, which yeah, might feel a little bit like not that fun because I think like Venus has been giving us kind of a little bit of reprieve while it's been spending some time in Libra. So we're just experiencing like, ugh, like, do we really have to feel that right now?
Yeah, because that's what I was thinking when you were saying about that, because reminding ourselves, like, we're starting this week coming off of like a Venus trine Jupiter, off of
Hmm.
like a Sun square Jupiter, off of like a really flowing, abundant aspect. And then Venus leaves that Jupiter flow and abundance and runs into Chiron. It's like a moment of like, oh, was that too good to be true? Was that too like, it's kind of a brings you down a bit. It brings you down to reality a bit to, hey, that was really exciting. Because it's also like that. Chiron's also our patterns and our wombs and patterns. So it's like,
Mhm.
oh, this was really awesome, exciting. Why do I still feel off about it? That's a subconscious pattern or wound that you have that stands in the way of you receiving the gifts from Venus and of Jupiter almost.
Yeah, none of us like those like patterns that we have to deal with over and over again. But they do show us something. It's kind of like when Chiron can represent that. It's like when these feelings emerge, like um, gross feelings or like things that we don't want to feel. All that it's really doing is like showing us, like, hey, you might be out of alignment with where you ideally would like to be. That's why you're feeling like these like lower vibrational or like crappy feelings because you would ideally like to feel this other way instead. So it could be like a moment where we're just like realizing the contrast that exists from like where we might want to be or like how we would like to ideally feel.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's just this continuous wound. It's that continuous like pain point that we have that holds us back from complete, release and promises because that's the whole experience of life anyways, to experience the good with the bad and the bad with the good. So that's Chiron here setting the stage, I think, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, absolutely. Me and Maddie were just talking about like anytime like Chiron is aspected, throughout our like regular transits, we're like, dang, does it really have to like show up again?
Yes, all the time. And it's so
Mm,
slow in Aries right now. It's such a freaking drag there.
I know.
But and we have the first eclipse. This is the full moon lunar eclipse. It's a partial lunar eclipse, so it's not a full one, but it's the first one that we're having in the sign of Pisces, and that's happening on September 17th. So if you're on the video version, you'll see the chart here. The full moon is at 25 degrees Pisces opposite the sun. The North Node is back in Aries at 6 degrees. So again, kind of farther away of a distance, but this is still an eclipse.
Mm-hmm.
Most notable is Neptune at Pisces or 28 degrees Pisces, very close to the full moon. Saturn's a little further back at 15 degrees Pisces. Aspects to this full moon, we have a sextile from Uranus at 27 degrees. We have a slight square from Jupiter at 20, and
Mm-hmm.
a sextile from Pluto at 29 degrees. So this is, I'll say my pieces to my main pieces. I talked about this a lot on TikTok, but that the fact that we had Pluto return to Capricorn, returning to that 29th degree, all these outer planets are at the same degrees, and then all aspecting each other. And then this full
Mm-hmm.
moon, which is an eclipse, which eclipses tend to really increase or destabilize energy. They bring really big beginnings and really big endings. This full moon then is touching all three of those outer planets as well. So it's kind of one of those things. I feel like it's a major shift, but it's also completely out of your control.
Mm.
How do you feel about that with all these outer planets in the
Yeah.
party?
Yeah, I was gonna say the exact same thing. Like with all the outer planets aspected, like let's look at the inner planets maybe as like things that are a little bit more within our control or within our like realm of like things we are personally able to influence. Outer planets, we don't really have any I almost want to say like the word jurisdiction. We don't have any like
Yeah.
like say over what happens. They're too far away and it's like we just can't grasp like their influence. So I think yeah, we would be really right to say that like we're going to have some type of like big impact that feels like outside of our control. And I mean, especially with the moon here being like conjunct with Neptune, this is like also we can't control Neptune, you know, like it is like Neptune is has a relationship with like the symbol of the sea. So it would be like trying to control the ocean. It's impossible.
Yeah, and you know when you ever you try to manipulate the ocean, it always comes and bites you back. So like yeah, I mean, the Neptune influence is probably the one that you'll feel the most just because the moon is so tightly conjoined Neptune, and Neptune is confusion and uncertainty and unclarity because it's not a practical planet at all. It's all about our intuition and like making decisions or understanding events through your feelings.
Hmm.
So that in itself is very difficult to have kind of grasp. Then you add that coupled with the fact that we haven't had an eclipse in Pisces until now. So this is that, well, until the last like 12 years, but this is that like, new beginning that you're also a new cycle is starting in your life. You're stepping into increasing the topics of your Pisces house and area of your life
Hmm.
that's starting, and then it's also really fucking confusing because
Mm-mm.
Neptune is like clouding the whole arena and you can't even see what the purpose of this new start is, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, we are. I mean, like Maddie mentioned, looking at to the Pisces ruled um house. Yeah, we're gonna have some like new influx of energy there, and that initial feeling is gonna be confusion. I think it's gonna be like, all right, like for me, I'll give me as an example. Pisces is my 11th house, like is depicted in the chart right here, and that rules like friendships and long-term dreams and communities, larger communities, things like that. I've been feeling like a call to like really like step more into friend groups. Like I want to expand my friend circle and like just like get more out into the community. But I might not exactly know where those friends are coming from or how that's going to happen. Like how am I going to make that happen. We just might not know. Like we might have this like inner feeling or inner calling, like, oh, I want to like start up this area of my life, but how will that really play out? I'm not sure. And with these outer planets aspected, maybe it's not maybe for us to decide, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's a bit of the dynamic that you have to personally wrestle with during this week, especially if you are kind of really feeling the confusion heightened, is that recognizing we are in Virgo season and Mercury is in Virgo, and those signs or that sign really does tend to like control and
Mhm.
like stability and structure and understanding every single detail. You don't get to do that this week. So you have to kind of accept that. You have to be like, I don't know the details to this. And that is just is what it is. And so, we'll talk about it more. I mean, we can talk about it now, I guess, as it starts tomorrow, but Mercury, is opposite Saturn during this full moon, and it goes exact on September 18th. And I think this is a real literal example of like Mercury wants to be gathering all this information and gathering a plan and creating a plan in Virgo and controlling this new increase in Pisces. But it's literally opposite Saturn, who's like, no, try
Mhm.
again, sit down. You don't actually have any say in this. You leave this to your elders, kind of thing. Like,
Yeah,
like a literal, like, oh, you don't get to know this. Bye.
literally. I mean, I feel like it speaks so purely to like the Virgo Pisces axis also. Like that is such like if you were to sum up the Virgo Pisces axis, like Virgo wants control and Pisces is okay with no control, you know? So, yeah, kind of just something we're gonna have to work through. We kind of have to like move through our own inner dialogue with like how comfortable are we with having control in our lives or not, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And so I do think that initial day, like right around that eclipse, 17th to 18th, is much more of a bummer feeling just because you have the Venus opposite Chiron, then you have Mercury opposite Saturn. Like you want to know. You want to
Yeah.
know. And I'm already getting like comments on my TikTok, like, can you talk about the eclipse coming up? It's like, no, you don't get to know about the eclipse. It's a secret. Like,
Literally, yeah.
no. Like that's what this energy is like giving. Like yeah, like you don't get to quite figure it out until later. So it's kind of accepting a lot of the harder uncertainty of life for this first start of the week.
That makes total sense though what you just said because I had been also like curious about the eclipse and I had been thinking like, what does it mean? And I also had been like a bit confused about it, like looking at it in my own chart, but that like really does speak to like there is like this air of uncertainty around it. Yeah.
So much more is to unfold. And so that is one thing too to remember with eclipses is that it takes time. It
Yeah.
takes time. It takes a year and a half for the full cycle of those significations to unfold. So no, you don't get to know after the first one. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, like you mentioned, like this is the very first one we're having in the sign of Pisces. So it's just going to be such a big unfolding, so don't expect like any huge major change like right off the bat. This is like you just said, energetics that are going to play out over the next year and a half. And you'll know like a couple months in what's happening.
Yes. It'll
Mm-mm.
it'll make sense with time. But in terms of this week, you may get a little bit more of like that inspiration or understanding on the 19th when the sun completes the trine to Uranus and Taurus. So, that lightning bolt of information, of downloads, of kind of clicking things kind of shocking in place or like understanding what is changing, Uranus being that huge component of change,
Yeah.
understanding now what this eclipse is asking you to change, perhaps.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, that could be. Yeah, like change moving into our awareness, like, oh, this is actually like what's shifting and moving around in my life. Yeah, and it might just be that like, oh, I can see a little bit more clearly now. Yeah.
Or it may just be like this made to be when a literal manifestation or a literal shock or change from the eclipse happens.
Mhm. Mhm.
Eclipses are not, they're a potent energy, but that energy doesn't always manifest on that same day the eclipse happens. So, you don't have the events happen exactly all the time. So, just maybe during this later week when the sun starts making those aspects, is like, Oh, and sudden ego awareness of like what is actually unfolding now,
Yeah, it
you
could be
know?
like the shock waves maybe that we
Yeah.
experience then afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah, like the real actual clarity around what is actually unfolding now, kind
Mm-hmm.
of thing. And I mean, clarity is a hard word to pose because, of course, if the sun is aspecting Uranus, that means on September 20th, it's going to become opposite Neptune then.
We run into confusion yet again. So we may think that we know, or maybe we think that we understand the change that's coming up. And then again, we're like, wait, maybe I don't actually know.
It could definitely, it's definitely that. It's like a definite, like, internal back and forth. I another way to kind of conceptualize that just kind of came in my mind as I was thinking is that you can think of like Uranus and Neptune aspects together and like they are only forming a sextile, but Uranus Neptune aspects, especially hard aspects, really relate to like big spiritual breakthroughs within societies or
Mhm.
changes within the norms of society. So the last time we had a Uranus Neptune aspect was like in the 80s or 90s when there was a big women's movement and like women's spirituality. Like whole new age was the new age that we know of now was born from that Uranus Neptune conjunction in Capricorn in the 90s and 80s.
I think I
So
remember reading about that in that, what was it, Richard Tarnas book?
yeah, and it
Yeah.
is. It's on Cosmos and Psyche, Richard
Hmm.
Tarnas. So just with that in mind, when the sun makes those aspects on the 19th and 20th, maybe too, it's more of how you are playing a role in sort of that spiritual reconstruction or sort of that like disruption in spirituality and beliefs and what actually matters in our life. You know, where is that being influenced the most in your life?
Yeah. I mean, we could be kind of experiencing, it could be at the micro level, the individual level, or
Right.
it could be at the macro level, and it could be happening simultaneously.
Exactly. But it's
Yeah.
like that big, I think like if you want like a really big overarching theme, is to put those two together and see how you're using spirituality to disrupt tradition.
Very interesting. Yeah, I think it would be interesting to kind of view, like, because spirituality does, it like shifts so much throughout time. Like, with each generation, there are new concepts and new ideas and new beliefs. And so we could be seeing like some kind of shift take place. So it would be very interesting to just watch and see.
I
Yeah.
know. I'm curious. I mean, we'll move on, but I'm curious like about the square when, Uranus squares Neptune, which is coming up in like the next 2 years or so,
Mhm.
because like I think that conjunction that we had in Capricorn in the 80s, 90s, that we're born under, a lot of us are born under, so we're
Yeah.
influencing that is a separation from the very traditional religious beliefs because religion is how a lot of things are controlled. Religion is really how governments are formed, and Christianity has been that overarching control. And I wonder, just from the birth of the new age women's movement, how we separate from really heavy patriarchal Christianity beliefs. This just may be a tiny little step, and then when we get to that square, we're really starting to conflict
Well, I
with
feel
it.
like that speaks so hard to our generation, though. Like, our generation
Right.
is like so progressive, and even if you look at things like our birth rates and like people getting married, it's like happening at way less rates than it was
Yeah.
in the past. But that could have also had ties to like religion.
I think religion can influences so much more than we give it credit for.
Yeah.
Like our culture, our family values, our culture norms, all of that has been influenced by religion.
Yeah. So it's so interesting actually to see that, these might actually be like a byproduct of like a religious beliefs changing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's what we're living in. And so yeah, this I would be curious to see what like spiritual topics, mystical topics or occultism topics come up like collectively around this eclipse in this week for sure.
Yeah. I think it would also be super interesting to watch and see. I'm interested to see like what turn religion takes in the future anyhow. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just like, do we revert back to like more structure, or do we continue to change things? I don't know. Interesting.
Shall
Yeah.
see. Yeah, we got a lot of that coming. I think spirituality, just the notion of spirituality is going to be such a huge theme starting with this eclipse and going into 2025 because then the
Mhm.
whole Neptune Saturn movement to Aries and all of that. So, yeah, what time? What time?
Yeah.
um to wrap up this week though, really sort of that transformative week. You get a little bit of help on September 21st. Mercury in Virgo will then square Jupiter in Gemini. So that is like when you're finally able to like logic and understand and rationalize and get ideas and make sense of things and put pieces together and actually create some sort of plan for forward movement.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that also, you know. Yeah, I think we'll have some like good energy moving forward, some like expansive thoughts or directions that we want to move in. And I think it could feel like a little bit of like a pick me up after the kind of uncertain energy that we experienced the prior days
Yeah.
of the week. Yeah.
Yeah, it may not be that you have the answers or the understanding, but that you can figure out a actual concrete plan to work with to utilize the information that you do have and like
Mm,
expand on that and keep searching for answers. And the Mercury square Jupiter may also be like, oh, I want to learn this, I want to study this, I want to do this, I actually want this sort of kind of push in a certain direction, perhaps.
yeah, we haven't really talked about this before, but Jupiter and Gemini is an amazing time to study. Like if there's
Yes.
yeah, if there's any like kind of topics that you're wanting to dive into, you can really go anyway. But yeah, it's just an amazing time to take in a lot of information.
Yeah, like Jupiter and Gemini wants to learn and it wants to
Mhm.
learn very deeply. Sometimes Jupiter and like Sag can be very dogmatic and only understand like overarching principles. But in Gemini, you understand not the principles, but how the components make the whole. And like you can really get into nitty-gritty details. So it can be a really fun time for that.
Yeah, I
Listening
think so
to,
too. Yeah, you can be like more susceptible to it than like you might have been in the past. Yeah.
yeah.
Cool.
Well, and on that note,
Hmm.
that is a great aspect because this is the last week we'll be promoting it, our 6 months signature program for learning astrology and spirituality and everything that you need to know about those two in conjoin. It starts on the 22nd. So, maybe on the 21st, you're like, I want to learn. You should probably already be signed up by then.
Yeah.
But yes, it's the last week that we're doing calls and essentially signing people up. So if you something you want to learn, if you want to learn everything that I know about astrology and then how we apply it to self-development, personal growth, and healing and psychology, that's our 6 month program that's starting on the 22nd. And we would love to have you there. All the information is in our link in bios on both TikTok and Instagram, but you can
Mhm.
also just DM us on their platforms to talk to us and schedule a call.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll be, like Maddie said, we'll be hosting calls for the remainder of this week and I think early into next week. And then we will be closing the doors. So, yeah, if that's something that you're interested in, definitely hop in a call with us. And yeah, we can talk more about how you can move forward and kind of expand your astrology knowledge.
Please. So we're really excited for it. So definitely just let us know if you want to learn more from us. And then you can find me on Instagram at maddie.delray, and my website is maddiedelray.com. And our Two Girls Talk Transits account is both on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Two Girls Talk Transits. And Kaleigh, what about for you?
You can find me heal.on earth on Instagram. And yeah, that's it. So,
Alright, we will see you all next week. Happy Eclipse Week.
see you. Have fun.